Can you edit it? At all?
Okay.
Probably.
We probably need to turn the volume down on my laptop so I don't blow everybody's eardrums out. That would be good.
Is the table up?
It is. I'm getting the
Okay.
the world map out now.
I'm hanging up clothes. That's the life I live.
I think folding laundry is the worst household chore that I have to do regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is worse than folding laundry.
That's why I hang up all my clothes.
See, here's the fun thing for me is my apartment building's washing and dryer machine is so expensive, so obscenely expensive, that it was $1 more every 2 weeks to just pay someone to fold and do all my laundry for me.
Okay.
Literally $1. That's how expensive this washing machine and dryer is.
So I promised you hipsters a really embarrassing D&D story, and as soon as I get the table loaded up here properly, because I have an updated map for you once again.
I'm fantasizing now about someone doing my laundry. It's so nice. Just hand all my dirty clothes to someone. Just
It's
be like,
$25 every 2 weeks.
You take care of this. Oh.
So before the stream started, we were having a little chat about people like remembering their class features and knowing how they work. When I sit down to like do DM planning, part of what I do is I look at every monster I intend to use and I transcribe their stat block in a notepad. So I have just a scratch pad with all the monsters I'm using. And I do this no matter how often I've used monsters with these abilities. I still type out their multi-attack and what it is and what other, like all their little stats and everything. I do it even if they have a feature I've used a million times, because no matter how much you use a feature in the game, you will always, always, always fuck it up at some point. So, I'm playing a champion fighter in our Prince of the Apocalypse game. This is probably the easiest subclass to play. There's literally nothing to it. If I had not taken feats on this guy, his only action in combat would be to attack. He would have nothing else to do. So, the only class feature they really get is the improved critical. They get critical hit on a 19 and a 20, and then when they get really high up in level, they critical on an 18, 19, or 20. They get twice as many crits as everybody else. And I get a shitload of critical hits. It's awesome. And I found this magical stick that has tentacles on the end of it. And it can make 3 attacks. And it can hit 3 targets within 15 feet. We call it the rape stick because it's, Japanese porn. We don't need to get into that. So, I rolled 3 critical hits last night. And the DM's like, okay, I know you get a lot of crits, but there's no way you just rolled 3 critical hits. And he looked, and I showed him, and I'm like, look, it's right there, 18, 18, 19. And he's like, you don't crit on an 18. And I'm like, I've been critting on 18 for 6 months. I fucked up the easiest class feature in the player's handbook. Because I wrote it on my sheet, 19 or 20, but my brain is thinking it'll be 18 someday also.
Yeah.
So, I felt terrible, and it was embarrassing as hell. I felt so bad.
So you know how every party has the one person who gets all the ones, right?
I don't know what you're talking about.
This is the verbal subtweeting, right?
No, like they are the... I want to say like the voodoo doll of the party. Like they suck up all the ones so that no one else has to deal with it.
Yeah.
We have that in my Saturday game, but they knew what was going to happen, so they played a halfling. They get an unlikely amount of ones, and every single time they get to go, oh, I get to re-roll that, and it crushes me in my soul.
I'll be honest, it was a little soul crushing every time I got a critical hit against Naf, and then Destil was like, eh.
Don't think so.
But
they rolled 12 ones in the last 2 sessions. 12.
Now, the reason I got into that habit was during the first Flumph campaign, I ran a monster that had a grapple attack. And back in those days, I was just, I know what I'm doing. I make no mistakes ever. I don't need to read and transcribe every little detail. And I ran like half this combat, and I'm like, why is this monster having such a hard time grappling these assholes? It should be easy. Turns out, I hadn't read the rules properly, and I didn't know what I was doing. So, Like, the standard I hold myself to with my monsters, apparently I don't hold my champion fighter to that same standard. I just have been cheating on dice rolls for months and not realizing it. So, we put a Sarah Fall here on the map. This is where
Should've
you
been on your
hipsters
character
are.
sheet.
Right there. That's the thing. It is on the character sheet. I wrote down 19 to 20. Whoops.
Oopsie doodle.
It's a good... Moral of the story is, it's a good practice to get into. It's just to sit down and read your character sheet every once in a while. Just refresh your memory of everything you've got. And I had healing potions that I hadn't seen in a year because I forgot I had them because they were listed on the wrong part of my sheet. And I drank them, and they were wonderful. Who has a 100-word summary of the trouble we got into last session?
We had probably the most deadly combat we've had since we started playing D&D.
You think so? That's the most deadly?
It was real touch and go there.
Zero people died.
No one died, and I think that's literally the definition for deadly. Like, I need to break out my book learning book, but
What's my record? 2? I got Eric and Daniel, I think, in one combat.
The final fight.
You got them in one breath weapon. Or was it disintegrate?
I forget. It must have been disintegrate because you guys had to go beseech Bahamut to bring them back. Anyway.
Didn't you... I swear you hit 3 people once in Flumphscape. Like you felled 3 people.
That's true. Killian and Riot got killed by werewolves, and they had to...
But there was no, it wasn't the werewolves. It was something later. It was what?
Like dead? Like...
fall over dead.
Like failed death save dead?
Not failed death save dead.
Okay, so just
3
unconscious.
people hit 0.
But yeah, that probably is one of the deadlier combats that I've run. I enjoyed it mightily. I had a lot of fun with that encounter, and I have another encounter for you guys, perhaps this session, that I think might be equally as interesting.
Okay, guys, let's not burn down the village.
So, what other trouble did you guys get into? Who knows anything about this little village you're staying in?
We took notes, kind of.
Notes
Let's not tell fibs.
Well, Raazu has an excuse for not taking notes.
Let's see, I spoke with the I forgot what race he was. The gentleman with the limp. I remember he had a limp.
The Goliath.
The Goliath, yes, thank you. We had a good time, although I didn't really learn anything.
Well, we'll have time this session to expound on all of those. Because, yeah, each of you had kind of a little plot hook going into town, and I know some of you had some avenues of exploration to attend to. Now, when you left Shallow Scale Lake, Huyan asked that you be back in 10 days' time. And you're on the afternoon of the 4th day right now. In fact, where am I keeping track of that? Here it is. Currently day 4 of 10. This evening, in the village, there is going to be a council meeting. The heads of households of all the Moakton in the town will be meeting in the largest building here to discuss village affairs. And the buzz around town is that one of the topics of discussion is going to be what to do with you all. The group of you are being treated very, very well in the village. You are experiencing great hospitality and friendliness, having rescued the village brewer and his son from an orc cage and bringing him home. Pretty much everybody you speak to in town loves you, and you are being... There's not a tavern or an inn in this town, but you're being put up in the home of Mother Stackpool. Her house... If anybody knows it, ping it before I get there. Oh, I gotta turn my...
It's either 7 or 16.
I thought it was 8.
Could be 8.
Capture
I
cursor.
thought it was 8 as well.
I'm willing to believe 8 because that's very close to the 2 that I thought it was.
And then, like, this is the one where, like,
It is
there's
8.
something.
Yes. She has a vegetable farm out back where she raises carrots, cabbage, turnips, and plump mushrooms.
And this is the one where they raise their psychedelic drugs, right?
Yes, that's where they make the Ootenkokage, which the villagers affectionately refer to as smoking oots.
No.
Uh-huh.
It happened. It happened, and just... So,
I don't.
none of the villagers can see or interact with Raazu. And Raazu can see the village. I'm sorry, she can't see the village. She just sees this grassy plain, and she doesn't see any of the Moakton. So, she is spending much of her time just watching the lot of you interacting with the pig folk. Going around town, interacting with objects that aren't there. As far as she's concerned, you're just all standing in this grassy hill next to this little creek.
Okay, sorry, finish.
Raazu pulls Adrex aside and says, "Listen, you better get some kind of ransom or reward for those two."
Oh yeah, no, sure,
Raazu,
definitely.
Before Adrex responds, Raazu, roll percentile dice. This is going to determine just what Adrex is doing when you pull him aside. I made a little table for this.
You made an Adrex table?
I would.
So how do we do? Oh, you're changing the dice. Okay.
Yeah, I'm doing it right now. Hiya!
I kind of want to see the Adrex table.
55.
A 55. So, Raazu eventually moves over to Adrex. And, Adrex, you're engaged right now in a bartering transaction. You're making some sort of trade in the city. So what kind of goods is Adrex trading for?
Probably brewer supplies of some kind, because he's taking his newfound hobby seriously.
Okay. So you are over at the Ellis farm, number 5
Yeah.
back here. And their little farm plot by their house is where they grow rye and hops. And then down in the cellar, they have all this brewer's equipment. So, Raazu, you kind of see Adrex standing there having a conversation with nobody in particular. And you go to walk up to him to pull him aside, and just as you do, he literally disappears under the ground. It looks like he walks down an invisible staircase right into the grass. And it's frustrating, but a few moments later, they come back up, and Adrex, you're carrying some minor brewing equipment. Father Ellis is going to kind of walk you through what the process is and how it all works. He took you down into his cellar to show you some of the old equipment he doesn't use anymore. And this is when Raazu sees you coming up, just walking out of the grass, kind of just emerging head first, carrying some brewing supplies, like some tubings and a decanter. And
That answers so many questions I have.
And I can't see the father anymore.
No, I mean, Father Ellis came up right before him, leading him up out of the cellar, but you can't see the cellar or the house or the floorboards or Father Ellis at all. But you do see Adrex holding these supplies.
Troll Town is amazing.
Raazu is very grumpy. But she does say, "Listen, you need to make sure we get some kind of reward for bringing these two back here."
Oh yeah, no, definitely. You want a beer?
To which Father
This
Ellis
is like
replies, "Definitely what? I mean, I can offer you a beer if you'd like one."
Right, you can't see Raazu, and Raazu can't see you. So Raazu's here, I'm talking to her, and Raazu, Father Ellis is here, and you can't see him.
Thank you. We already knew all this.
Father Ellis knows who Raazu is because he's the one you rescued from the orcs. So he's on his journey back. He and his son were with you. So he
But
says
Adrex doesn't know that he can see Raazu, or he can't see Raazu.
he can't. But he says that this is a topic that he intends to bring up at the meeting tonight.
Oh. And then after a moment of awkward silence, he relays it to Raazu, remembering, like, oh yeah, no, she can't have heard that.
Okay, so
Raazu lets out a very long sigh and then goes to stand watch over by the creek and starts sharpening her halberd.
Let's go ahead and just get a quick bevy of afternoon actions, beginning with Birdie. What is Birdie doing this afternoon?
Well, I was thinking about taking the wand that we have and the small torch and going over, sitting next to Raazu so she's not by herself, and examining that stuff.
Okay. Which wand do you have?
We have.
It'll have a letter associated with it.
We don't have the letter associated with it. It's the wand of flame arrow.
No, I've already got that one.
Yes,
Yeah,
I know.
it says right here, red has
Red
it.
has that one, yeah. It's wand A, by the way.
Wand
Yeah.
A. Okay.
So you're going to chill out with the magic torch and see if you can
Yeah.
work with it? Okay. What about...
Just make sure you note that on the loot sheet.
What about Adrex? What is Adrex's afternoon action? Are you going to brewing
It
school?
depends. It depends. It's either if the rangers are around, he wants to chill with the rangers
Okay.
and pretend to be a ranger. Otherwise, yeah, he's going to be brewing. So it depends on if the rangers are in town and they're going to go out and hunt or do rangery things.
They're in town right now because today is going to be their village council. None of the three rangers are heads of household, but the way it works is there's a great big table in the building in number 10. The heads of household sit around it and have a discussion. Other villagers are allowed to kind of stand and watch the conversation, but not add to it. But none of the rangers are heads of household, but they do attend these meetings, so they're in town.
Okay.
What about Raazu? Just chilling out by the creek?
Yeah, now that she has company, she will also express interest in what Birdie's working on.
Okay. And what about Red?
Red is going to wander around the village and see if he can basically eavesdrop on anyone without really drawing attention to himself. He's going to pick up any rumors or anything.
What are you trying to learn in particular? Like, what kind of information are you interested in?
I mean, I don't honestly... Anything that seems... Let me think. Yeah, I don't have any particular goals because I don't know what people will be willing to say while, I'm around.
Okay, make me... Let's call it dexterity investigation, because you're trying to eavesdrop and gather information without it being obvious that that's what you're doing.
That would be a... 4 for dex, and his investigation is one of my double proficiencies, so... +8. 24.
24. It's pretty good. Okay. And what is Windy doing this afternoon?
I'm causing some light vandalism.
Okay.
Let's not burn down the village, please.
Well, I'm not burning down the village, but somebody last week, or yesterday, mentioned hoping that it didn't rain on Raazu, and that's very, very curious. And so I'm going to be essentially stealing some thatch from the roofs and
Okay.
trying to surreptitiously drip some water onto it above Raazu and see if it hits her.
Roll me make a stealth check.
You got it.
Seventeen.
Do I see Birdie trying to do this nearby?
That's an excellent question.
Windy.
Oh, yeah,
that is-
Windy.
Okay. Let's do Windy's first, because I just want to get it over with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like many things involving Nodal.
Am I assuming that Windy wants to collect some thatch from a house that looks like it might already be partially damaged?
Yeah.
Okay. The least kept building in town is 19. This is the storehouse. It's not in disrepair, but it is in mild disuse sometimes out of the year. And what you've come to learn is that the caretaker of the storehouse is a pig man named Broderick McBroderick.
All right, if you say so.
And you've heard that he is out of town for long stretches of time, sometimes weeks or even in 1 or 2 cases, months at a time before returning. And when he's gone, the villagers kind of make use of what they need in the storehouse without his input. You haven't seen McBroderick around town, and you don't know whether he's in town or not. He might not be in the village. So you decide, I'll take some thatch off of that roof. You circle around to the back here. So, I mean, Raazu and Birdie can see you worrying at the roof of this house, tearing apart a handful of thatch. And then you hear a voice from the trees next to you call out, "What are you doing?"
And I'm gonna stand up and then put the thatch behind my back
Okay.
and be like, okay, listen. I really, really want to drip some rain on a friend of mine.
Here, let's just go ahead and throw you guys where you're going to be.
And
then-
I'm extremely curious as to how this spell of yours works.
This Moakton comes walking out of the woods, watching you. And make an insight check. Make
Alright.
it at disadvantage.
Okay. That's a 9.
And all you can think of is, what's it like to be arrested by the Moakton? This might be interesting.
Yeah.
Are you sure
He
you're
comes
not a
out
sensei?
looking at you and he says, "We have straw and thatch in storage if you'd like me to retrieve some for you."
I'm gonna look down and he goes, yes, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
And he worries at his belt for a moment and pulls out a ring of jangling keys. And he's regarding you very suspiciously.
And I'm just gonna put the straw that I'm holding back on the roof and just kind of pat it down.
You reach up and pat it back down.
Yeah.
And the pigman introduces himself as McBroderick. And he tells you, well, he wants to, in person, relay his gratitude for bringing the Ellises back home safely.
Oh, sure, of course. It was the right thing to do.
He says that it's a terrible grief and a shame. And you're realizing at this point that this Moakton is speaking impeccable common. But yeah, it's a grief and a shame that poor Megan, I've heard there's not even enough of her left to bury.
And I'll nod in response and I'll say, I wouldn't recommend going out for it. For her.
He says he attempts to stay clear of orcs, even on their best days. At this point, he takes you into the storehouse, and you can see where they've got their pallets of meat and stored grain, several casks of ale and other drink, a couple more casks of just fresh water.
Oh, that's much better. Actually, I don't think I need this straw at all. One of them casks of fresh water. That's perfect.
He stops as he's gathering materials for you. He asks, "What exactly do you need this for?" It's just water. It's not a commodity he's unwilling to part with, but he seems very bewildered.
But it's invisible water, and sometimes intangible water. And that second one is the key.
Then you see his recognition click into place. He says, "You're planning to play a prank on your hobgoblin companion."
I would do it openly, but she would get very, very angry.
And he responds in Wendy doesn't speak goblin, does she?
No.
Okay, so then he responds in a language you don't understand, but you recognize as goblin, because you travel with Raazu so much.
Yeah, and I nod and I say, yeah, she'd say something like that.
And you see this just grin on his face. And he asks you what the plan is.
I say, okay, well, here's the thing. She's right now a certain distance away from the village. I'm operating under the assumption that at some point this intangible water will go back to being tangible water? And I asked that like with a question, looking at him in the face. And I'm wondering if what I could do is maybe use some of this water, first of all, as just like a baseline test to see if it gets her wet, but then go put some tangible water in this intangible barrel, bring it over, and just kind of like see what kind of expression she has on her face as this water just floats over.
Instead of a cask, he recommends you use a skin, and he finds an empty water skin, fills it up with water from the barrel. He assures you that the skin was made in the borders of the village. He hands it over to you.
Is it the borders of the village then?
Having seen your friend standing, I don't know, 100 yards away or so maybe, I don't actually know what the scale of this map is.
Yeah.
He tells you that on this side of the creek, they're inside the borders of the village. If you go beyond the creek, you are not anymore.
Alright.
So what's Wendy's plan? She's going to fly out there and just dump this water skin on Raazu's head?
I think I'm just gonna drop the water skin if he's assuring me that the water itself wasn't made within the borders of the village.
Well,
I'm
the water,
extremely curious.
the water came from the creek. But, I mean,
Okay.
you being in this
I
barrel...
brought some of my own water.
So you're going to throw 2 water balloons at Raazu then.
I'm gonna throw 2 water balloons at Raazu and see if one of them, like, deflates and then Raazu gets wet, but the water skin is still closed. And Wendy at this point is thinking to herself, yeah, this is a perfect plan. She won't see me flying. Like, completely ignoring the fact that I think Raazu's going to be able to put 2 and 2 together on this one.
Also, I think Raazu can see you. But
Oh, who would look up at the sky? No one looks up at the sky.
It's true. Absolutely nobody does. Red.
Mm-hmm.
The center of the village here, throughout the day, is where most of the women folk will come and gather. Right now, there's many clotheslines set up across the center of it, and they're throwing breeches and clean linens and things over them. And you figure this will be a good place to kind of eavesdrop and figure out the haps. The conversation right now between some of the women is the Perry family, the leather workers in town, and the clothier and the leather worker. Their house is number 12. It's way over here by the entrance to town. He also does tanning for leather, so they want him out on the outskirts, basically.
Mm-hmm.
They're discussing whether or not Mother Perry, a Mukden woman named Canyid, has gotten over the death of her infant son, who died winter last year. And at first you're thinking, oh, that's sad. That's too bad. But as you continue to listen, you realize these women talking about this dead infant and a person who is ostensibly their friend, they're kind of talking about it in a very insensitive way. Like, you get the sense that, man, like, she should just get over it, you know? It was sad, but it's been a year. Come on.
Can I make an insight roll to see if I can sense that any of them have anything like motivationally in terms of emotions, like other than regret or sorrow?
This is puzzling enough that you'd have to take a closer look. Yeah, go ahead and make an insight check.
Insight. That would be a 16.
A 16. When they're discussing this dead infant, they're kind of tiptoeing around what killed it. You glean from the conversation that the baby wasn't carried off by orcs. They didn't lose it to illness or stillbirth. It wasn't for lack of love and attention. It wasn't injury. They're kind of tiptoeing around what it was. And rolling it over, the only thing you can think of is ritualistic slaughter. And maybe that's just the Yuan-ti inside of you. but it sounds almost like the village killed this child. And
So it sounds like they're talking like in the beginning of the lottery, basically.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Okay.
But this happened at the beginning of last winter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you do with this information?
I'm just gonna keep it to myself for now.
Okay. And Adrex,
Yes, sir.
you wanted to seek out the Rangers.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me find one for you.
We're gonna consult the Adrex chart again.
It's not actually an Adrex chart. It's a what happens if Raazu wants to talk to the PC's chart.
I still like the idea of an Adrex table. But yeah,
Damn.
no, Adrex wants to hang out with other rangers.
Okay.
Sort of like when dogs find other dogs, and they're really excited.
You catch up with two of the Rangers, having a small meal over here by the stage. One of them his name is Tudor Conway. Tudor, you learned, was shacked up with one of the widows in the village, who's 10 years older than him. They refuse to marry, and the whole village kind of looks down their nose at him. And the other one is Arianed Bolivar. Is a female Moten. And they're having a discussion, and they stop whatever they're talking about as you approach them. How do you approach them?
Smiling and waving.
Okay.
Completely oblivious to the fact that they may be having some sort of private conversation.
If they are in any way upset or put out at your advance, they are not showing it at all, because as soon as you show happiness and greetings, they respond exactly in kind. In fact, they both get to their feet and they make a big show of waving you up onto the stage. Arianid reaches down, pulls you up so you don't have to go around and walk up the stairs to the side, and they offer you part
thanks.
of their meal.
Excellent, thank you. That's very kind.
And they indicate that it's only a small amount of what's owed after you return to the Ellises safely home.
All in a day's work. All in a good day's work.
Just over some light conversation, you learn there's a third ranger in town who is absent at the moment. He's due back from his hunts tonight. You glean that... Make an insight check, actually.
I can insight.
Can you?
Theoretically.
Okay.
That is, I believe that's a 15.
What they were talking about when you came up, you didn't hear any part of the conversation, but you managed to kind of squirrel it out of them, come back around. And what they were discussing is Arianed, in particular, wants to make a gift to you and the rest of your group in thanks for bringing their brewer home. And Conway thinks that that's a bad idea. And that's kind of where you came in. So where you want to steer the conversation from there is up to you.
Remembering the words of Raazu earlier, Adrex would steer the conversation into, a gift sounds like a perfectly pleasant idea.
And at this, I mean, Conway grins. And it's kind of unsettling when a pigman grins, in a way. I mean, the male ones have big tusks. And he says...
That's not going to stop Adrex from grinning, too.
Before that you and yours leave the village, that probably everyone in town will get around to loading you down with more food and supplies and little knickknacks, Moten hospitality than you could possibly carry. And he says there's no danger at all of you and your friends leaving empty-handed.
Excellent. My friend Raazu will be very pleased to hear that.
And neither of them know who Raazu is. They saw the four of you come back with the brewer, essentially.
Right, Raazu. You guys can't see Raazu, and Raazu can't see you guys. Raazu's the fifth one in our party. She's the Hobgoblin.
And the two of them exchange looks for a moment, and they confirm that the word you used in common to say Hobgoblin is, in fact, the word you meant to say.
Uh-oh.
At that point, they exchange some words back and forth in the Moakton tongue. It doesn't sound like they're having like an unseemly discussion. Like you haven't caught them off guard. It's just like a quick question back and forth. At that point, Irianed excuses herself. And Conway reaches back to a skin that he's carrying and offers it to you. And says, would you like to partake of some of the fruits of the labors the Ellises have brought to this village? Learn what a great travesty their loss would have been.
I would love to.
And he hands you this large wineskin.
Cheers. Takes a big old chug.
It's very bitter and very dry, and also very strong.
Mm. Mm. Oh, wow. All right then. Wow. Whew.
He then begins pelting you with a lot of questions just about your travels out and about. Being a ranger, his jobs are mostly to hunt wild animals and bring them back. Once in a great while, they'll have to chase off some threat to the village. But he seems particularly enamored with stories of adventurers from lands afar. You tell that he has some experience being out in the wilderness, but he probably hasn't been outside of 50 miles around this village. What kind of stories do you regale him with?
No, Adrex is not one to turn down such hospitality, so he regales him with his personal details, how he started in his village and how he was an outcast of his village because he wasn't keen on his white dragon god, so they exiled him. And traveling the lands, he was taught to be a ranger. People were very gracious and able to taught him to be a ranger, and that's how he survived on the land to this day, wandering around, satiating wanderlust.
Does Adrex carry a bow or any kind of ranged weapon?
Only his axes. He's proficient in bows, but
In
the
that
thought
case-
of throwing axes is so much cooler.
In that case, Tudor kind of inquires about it. Like he noticed that your little kobold companion carries a bow, as does the bird lady. But he finds it strange, your stories of being trained as a ranger and making your path in the wilderness, but you don't use the appropriate weaponry.
That's why it says fighter in his character sheet, not ranger.
Well,
It's right up on
that's
him.
because I have these, and he says, pulling out his hand axes. Let me show you. What can I hit on this stage with a hand axe that's not going to be terrible?
I mean, there are wooden beams and stuff up on the stage.
Yeah. Adrex hurls an axe at one of the wooden beams. Please let me make an attack roll.
Sure.
No, why would you ask for that? Now you're gonna hit a 1. It's guaranteed.
I was just going to let him have it, but...
No, I want Adrex to see how good Adrex can actually
Now he's
be.
gonna crit it and take down the stage.
then every house in the village just falls down like dominoes. It was a load-bearing stage.
17.
And yeah, you put several axes into several beams along the back of this stage. And what's Adrex's strength score?
He is a 19.
You can tell that Tudor has never seen someone just of your just brute physical strength. The distance and the power at which these axes get thrown. And he steps forward and he wrenches one out of the beam, and there's a very deep gouge in the wood. He is very thoroughly impressed. He tells you that it's no mystery why you had no trouble with those orcs, as he hands your axes back to you.
Not all rangers use bows.
He asks if any of your party have spoken to the Widow Stackpool about tonight's council meeting.
I don't know. I should let them know that there will be a council meeting tonight, then we can attend.
He says that it's not his place to say, because he's not a head of household at all. But if he were you, he would bring up to Mother Stackpool an old Moncton tradition called guest right. And at that, he leaves you. No doubt to go tell the rest of the villagers about your incredible martial prowess.
All right.
Birdie, make me
Yes.
an intelligence arcana check as you spend an hour or two examining this torch. What all are you doing with it? Like physically?
Well, let's see. I am. Let me think. We are. Well, I am just turning it over, looking for any obvious markings, any obvious way to that it might come apart without forcing anything.
There doesn't look to be anywhere for it to come apart. Like a standard torch would be a piece of wood with rags wrapped around it, draped in oil. This looks to be like all one solid thing. And the actual torch part that glows itself is solid and does not give off a large amount of heat. At least not as much as, say, fire. What was that arcana check?
Let's see. I rolled an 11 plus 5, so 16.
Okay. And what is Raazu doing to distract Birdie from this task?
None at all. She's just sharpening her halberd.
Getting pelted.
Russ is getting ready to just slaughter the village.
You don't get to the heart of the magic of this item. You can't explain why it works or how it works, and the underlying magics that cause it to glow escape you. However, seeing this object and using it and kind of understanding things that it's not capable of. For example, you can't take it apart. It looks like it's going to be made. The material it's made of is too hard to shatter. It doesn't go out when you put it down in the river, etc. You're pretty sure that it's helping you to understand, at least surface level, how lighting magic works. Mechanically, if you're trying to make an Arcana check to spellcraft a light spell, something that gives off light, I'll allow you to make that check at advantage, as long as you have this torch.
All right. Make that down.
By that I mean spells that only produce light. Something like light, continual light, things like that. Not, say, sunbeam.
What time of day is it?
It's afternoon. It's getting on to the late afternoon now.
Okay, then Raazu would probably start to. Is there a riverbed? Like, is there enough space below the below the bridge that I could walk underneath it?
Yes, I mean Raazu could completely submerge herself in this river if she wanted to.
Well, I mean, is there like a riverbed where it's dry at all?
The grass kind of grows just right up to the edges of the river. You can see where the area where you're sitting is... Well, I mean, you can't. Birdie can see the area where you're sitting is very well worn, where the moat did come down here all the time. To you, it looks like a river just carving through the wilderness.
Raazu is going to start making camp as best she can.
Okay. Wendy, make me 2 attack rolls. Ranged attack rolls.
Mm-hmm. That's a nat 1
Okay.
and a 23.
So, Raazu, you're setting up camp, and a water skin hits the ground just right next to your feet. And then you're like, what the hell? You go to turn around, and the next one catches you right in the head, and you are just drenched as this water skin... uncorked water skin, I'm assuming.
No, I corked it because I wanted it to... I was thinking the water skin would just phase right through her.
It didn't. It hit her right in the head.
And you actually hear, oh!
Now,
Raazu turns her head to look in that direction.
Yeah, and it's very, like, Wendy's just sitting there going, oh! With her hands in front of her mouth.
so Wendy and Birdie, what you see Well, I mean, Wendy, you throw the skin. It just looks normal. It hits her in the head. Birdie, you hear the impact of the first water skin hitting the ground, and then the second impact of it hitting Raazu's face. Raazu, you never saw anything coming. It did not phase through you.
But the impact clearly came from the direction that Wendy is, right?
Oh no, it's very clear what happened. Wendy's not hiding it at this point.
Birdie, Wendy, and probably half of the village could probably hear. Well, not anybody who's on like the south end of the village would hear like just like hundreds of obscenities in a minute.
They can't. They can't hear
in Hobgoblin. Just like the kind of thing that would make your mom blush if she spoke Hobgoblin.
Hey, Raazu, go ahead and add both of those water skins to your character sheet.
Sure.
Yeah, those are yours now. You've earned them.
Excellent.
And the sun begins to set. You see the village begins to prepare for this council meeting. And the rest of your guys' group convenes back at Mother Stackpole's house. She being the head of her household, how she has been for years and years and years. And she tells you that everyone in the village is going to be able to attend and listen in on the meeting, and you all are welcome to come as well, if it's the kind of thing that interests you.
What was the name of the rite that was told to Adrex?
Tudor told you to ask Stackpool about something called guest rite.
Guest rite, thank you.
Before Stackpool gets there, and you all leave for the meeting, Red, do you bring up anything about what you heard with the washerwomen?
Yeah, I think I actually will mention that to the group.
Okay, let's have that conversation briefly then, because this is something you guys
Is there
can
some
kinda
place
have.
that we won't be overheard?
It's really easy just to find a spot in town where you're not going to be overheard or you're not going to be approached.
I strongly recommend not to the south near the river. Some things might have gone down there that everyone might not be happy with.
So is Raazu not invited?
I mean,
I
I
assume you
would
weren't there because we were planning on going to the meeting, but yeah, Red, do you go search for
yeah, I
Raazu?
would totally go find Raazu.
All right,
Well,
then. Actually,
I'm assuming
I take
Birdie
that
brought
back.
Raazu back. All five of you are at the same spot right now.
Raazu gives Wendy the entire stink eye the entire time this conversation happens.
Okay, well, listen. I was planning we make some arrows, shoot them at some orcs, then they can't get the arrowheads out because there's no arrow there. You know, it was a murder tool. You like those?
Wendy, make me a wisdom check. Actually, make this an intelligence check. Not wisdom.
Well, you're really gonna hurt me here, huh? One second.
Murder tool.
That's a 8.
An 8. Okay, you have no idea what happened or how that interaction played out. So, Red, you had delightful information to share with your group.
So, I was listening to the villagers speaking, and they were talking about a woman who had lost an infant child fairly recently, about a year ago. And now, I understand emotion, even if, I don't necessarily display it or have it. You would think, from my, somewhat limited time being around other types of creatures, that they would be sympathetic or they would be remorseful, but I got nothing, and the only thing I can compare it to is the way people talk about ritual slaughter among my own people.
Okay, but this isn't like before, when we were just going out to buy, lunch, and you compared that to ritual slaughter. This is, for real.
I mean, if you really want to make hair on rat correctly, they need to be bled for 2 days in the sun, but not in direct sunlight. That's just, look, there's some things you just can't, half-ass. But no, this is much different.
Do you think that's why the village is invisible?
And it's about this point that Stackpool comes up. And Adrex asks her about guest right. She laughs when she hears you mention it. And she says that she would be delighted. This is a cantankerous old woman, all right? And like, imagine you're staying at like B. Arthur's house.
So we're all real nervous, is what you're saying.
And you can tell that there are people in this village that Mother Stackpool just loves to take the piss out of. And she thinks that attempting to invoke guest right, which is something that hasn't been done here since she was a small girl, and even then, only under protest, she thinks that would ruffle feathers in an extremely delectable way. Basically, what it means is that a village council like this considers all inhabitants of the village, including guests. In other words, your group can select one from among you to sit in on the council as the head of your household and speak for your group in the manner of all village interests.
Do we get a name? Can we name our house? Can we get a crest for our house?
This is all up to you guys.
Oh.
Keeping in mind that like naming your house is the kind of thing that might have campaign-wide repercussions. Like when Joey says, "What should we name our little group?" And you don't know that it means that's going to be the name of your army 6 hours later for the rest of the 30-hour game. So,
And you have Butthole Army?
yeah, now you're stuck with Butt Cheese Army for the whole game. So if you pick a group name, put some thought into it. Don't go with Butt Cheese.
Have you met Adrex?
Raazu is looking very bewildered at hearing only one side of this conversation.
So yeah, she says if you're planning to invoke guest right, essentially you'll just elect a representative from your group to speak on behalf of your group for all village matters. And many people won't like it, but these are the sorts of people who kind of need to have their chair kicked out from under them from time to time.
Wendy looks around the group and thinks about who she would send, and then looks again with like widening eyes, and just goes, "Red?"
What do you say?
I mean,
Red?
I'm
You wanna
not
be
the
head of
worst
household?
negotiator.
What is even happening? I don't understand. I've only heard her explanation of it. I've only heard what your side of the conversation.
They can bring you up to speed though. They're not.
Well, seeing as I can't hear or speak to them, I guess I'm out of the running.
On the other hand, you also wouldn't take up a seat. That's convenience.
So do you plan to invoke guest right? And if so, who is the head of your household?
I think it's Red.
It's Red?
Yeah.
All right.
And
Okay.
Yeah,
I suppose.
I'm working under the assumption that this is why Red was built. Do things like this.
Okay. So, what interest does Red have in just the day-to-day runnings of this little pigman village?
Red is interested in finding out what they know about the local area. Anything that they might be able to tell him. Anything he might be able to find out about, like other orcs that have been in the area recently, maybe from the Rangers. He's also interested in finding out if there's any more clues towards this ritual sacrifice that he suspects.
Okay. Let me
And
rephrase
I
that a
guess
little bit.
I'll ask the rest of the group, kind of quietly before we go. Is there anything else you guys want me to pry into or bring up?
Yeah, this is your chance to make formal requests on behalf of your group from this village.
I think we should ask them to assist the lizard men, because if the dragon over there is invading this region, we could make a case with them that it affects them too, because their little magical barrier only affects goblinoids and orcs. It doesn't affect this. It wouldn't affect the servitors of a dragon, such as kobolds, as Birdie attests, because he can see everything. If he wanted to, he could set fire to the whole village.
Also, and
that-
Wendy like stops mid sentence, and then starts up again. Also, if you can find out how the barrier works, and if we could replicate it for the lizard men, that might also work out.
And Birdie speaks up. Ooh, ask them if they have any like magic scrolls or anything I can take a look at.
Yeah, ask them if they have any magic scrolls that don't involve setting fire to the village. And Wendy gives a big frown towards Birdie.
Okay.
I wasn't going to set fire to the village. It was just an example of what could happen if a group of kobolds got into the village.
So, over the course of the meeting, and in the meeting, you guys get the sense this is just a formality. They're going to get together and talk for an hour about nothing, come to the decision to keep doing everything the way they've been doing it, and then it's time to feast. That's kind of what everybody's here for. So one of the adults has taken all of the children of the village to one of the houses, and the rest of the adults, it's standing room only inside this house that you go into, house number 10 on this map. The owner of this structure, which is used as a town hall, are the Oliver family. Father Oliver, his name is Morthwill, and Morthwill is regarded as essentially the town mayor. His official function is the upkeep of this town hall. Other than that, all the decisions of the village are made communally amongst all the heads of household. Counting Red, there are 14 people sitting around this table. And as soon as you guys go in, and Red announces that they will be invoking the tradition of guest rights, and he takes a seat at the table, you see sour looks from many of the people at the table. The most sour of all is the oldest Moakton gentleman you've ever seen in your life, sitting at the table, and he is absolutely beside himself with anger at this.
Are we there with Red, or is this just Red only?
Red is up at the table. You guys they have cleared out a sitting room next there, and it's standing room only in that room. It's the rest of you guys, all the other Moakton, and Raazu's probably standing inside of somebody because they're not going to make space for her.
We're hovering at the table, not literally though, Brick Road. I did read the flight rules.
So they keep about a 5-foot gap between where the crowd is and where everybody is sitting at the table. You're not allowed closer than that. Adrex.
Yes. Adrex has a very big grin on his face. He's very pleased with this situation.
The storehouse keeper, McBrockton, kind of shoulders his way into the group and stands between you and Wendy. And he introduces himself formally to you. And he does so in impeccable Draconic.
Oh.
Like, you weren't
speak
sure
Draconic.
that with the big tusks in this thing's face that pigmen would even be able to speak Draconic and pronounce it properly. But he is. Like, he's even trilling the R's correctly. And
Your Draconic is impeccable.
Hey,
he says the ears could use a little work.
Red.
Mm-hmm.
Ensure we get some kind of compensation for rescuing those two.
Well, I mean, it has been a while since I've been at the village, so... Yeah, that's probably true.
Okay. The third, or the other character that you make note of in this group of pigmen that you hadn't met before now is the third of the 3 rangers. And he is a very dour-faced, middle-aged ranger. But he does not take a seat at the table. He stays back by the front door of the house. And they start talking. I mean, these council members. Father Oliver brings the meeting to order. Nobody stands in the way or debates much about invoking guest right, even though half of the villagers are obviously not happy with it. There's murmurs out in the crowd about how scandalous it is. And for the first hour or so, they talk about just the most boring, mundane stuff. Who's going to turn over their fields? Whose children are coming of age and are going to be betrothed to who? It's just endless, just chit chat that just doesn't affect you guys at all, unless Red has some input there.
Is there anything that might be relevant to Red's skills or abilities?
Probably not.
Okay.
Unless Red is going to try to broker these marriage contracts or go out into the farm and turn soil or...
I mean, Red could totally negotiate a marriage contract if they actually need a impartial negotiator.
Father Conway notes that he found some inexplicable damage done to several of the beams on the stage, but he assures everybody that they will be repaired in short order. The youngest man sitting at the table, very, very young. I mean, you guys probably don't have much of a measurement for what a teenage Moakton looks like, but he looks like a teenager, and he's very scrawny and a little sickly. The meeting, by the way, is being conducted in the Moakton tongue. Red, you're sitting next to Mother Stackpole, who is translating for you.
Mm-hmm.
The sickly young man, who takes his time at the table as Father Yarwood. He's a toy maker in town. He and his wife live together. They have no children. He petitions for the ability to leave the village in search of a flower called water licorice, which are black in color and secrete a honey-like dew. And there's some discussion about whether or not this is worth the ranger's time to go off in search of this flower. What he wants it for is that his wife and some of the other women in the village want to try their hand at making perfumes. And it sounds like the council is turning against him. This is something it's too dangerous for them to allow him to go out alone. I mean, look what just happened to Father Ellis when they left the village. And this is definitely not worth the ranger's time. Does Red step in on this issue?
Yeah, no, Red will totally be like, you know, if you have something like this that you consider to be too dangerous, our group is still potentially available.
Mother Stackpole takes great joy in translating your every word for this group. And some of the people at the table...
her jaw.
Some of the people at the table, I mean, they're giving you dirty looks.
Raz is giving Red a dirty look as well.
Well, you're giving the back of Red's head a dirty look.
Yeah.
Raazu, what's perfume?
I don't know that a hobgoblin would wear perfume at the best of times.
No damn idea.
And the question comes back from one of the other Moakton at the table, Father Maddox, who's a potato farmer. He grows spuds. And he says, kind of with disdain, and he says, and I imagine for such a service, you and your companions would ask for coin rather than potatoes.
Well, what exactly do you have that's valuable?
Roll me an insight check. I'll roll Maddox at disadvantage because he's not really trying to... Oh, he actually rolled really well, but probably didn't beat that. What does that 16 turn into?
Insight is a +7.
Okay, yeah. It blows his 17 away. Maddox doesn't dislike outsiders. In fact, at some point in the day, he probably pressed a bag of potatoes into one of your hands as thanks for bringing Ellis back. He doesn't like the fact that you've invoked guest right, that you sit at this table as an equal to him. He finds that offensive, basically. And he tells you that the village doesn't make anything that outsiders would be interested in. And your read on this is a point of pride for him. His people don't trade with gold. They don't trade in warfare. They're a peaceful folk who work the land in harmony. They keep themselves in balance. And that he sees you as a disruptive force, coming in and offering to do jobs in exchange for coin. But his answer to your question is, that the village doesn't make anything that you'd be interested in. And you see Father Yarwood just deflate when he says that.
Well, the one thing we could use would be a fair amount of food provisions that might stay well to reload our wagon. We're a few days... sled, really. We're a few days beyond and have given up some of what we need, so...
To which Father Bonner, the old hard-ass traditionalist at the table, speaks up. Yes, we gift you with all of our food, and we have none for the winter.
I'm not trying to put you out. If you can't spare any food, you can't spare any food. I'm just saying that's probably the only thing of value here that we would find some use for.
So then the question comes kind of around to, I mean, you and your companions have kind of had free reign of the village since the afternoon. You've all met some of the people. You kind of know what they make here, how they live. What requests would Red make? What would he ask for in exchange for doing this task?
Better information from your rangers about the immediate area, and any as far afield.
Cut out.
I missed that part. I heard it as far afield. Oh, Discord, don't do this.
I think we might have lost the Destil.
Uh-oh.
I don't think this is on Discord.
Just if you're in trouble, blink twice.
He's still in the Discord.
Oh, I hear it pop.
Destil just vanished.
He lost his internet.
Yep.
This is entirely Nodal's fault, I'm sure.
It's not my fault Destil's playing Hobgoblin.
Okay, let's do this then. Let's, I'm going to put Elizagirth on screen. Just so later I know to cut this little tiny break out. And we'll just give Destil a few minutes to resurface while I run to the fridge and get a fizzy drink. This isn't our break. We're just going to take 2 minutes and see if he pops back on real quick.
Sure.
I might have my last soda of the evening.